Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at our VSFTPD server, also known as our File Transfer Protocol or FTP server on our CentOS installation. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on the use of an FTP server on CentOS, our Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager, as well as some basic networking. So to begin with, you'll notice that I have both my server and my client up and running. For this demonstration, this assumes that you have both of them installed and set up, and specifically that on the server that you have the VSFTPD server installed. We will check to see that it is in fact running and that you have went through and created an additional account specifically for the purposes of FTP. Now, you will not need to install the FTP server on the second machine or on your client. Instead, we will be using an FTP client to connect to the server. So let's go through some of the basic troubleshooting steps, starting by logging in with a user that has sudo permissions. And we can go ahead and log into any account on the client. Again, we're going to be bouncing back and forth between the two machines. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off first on the server by simply making sure that we have, in fact, installed the VSFTPD service. And we can do that by running sudo systemctl status. And then we want to look at the VSFTP daemon, and we'll be prompted for our password, and you'll see that it is active and running, although we still have it set as disabled. In other words, if we restart the virtual machine, it will not come up automatically. We can later on enable it, but this assumes that you've done that already and have already configured the firewall correctly. And if you want to check that real quick, we can again also use the sudo and firewall command. And we simply want to list the ports that have been enabled. In 1 second here, sorry about that. I missed the dash. There we go. And you can see here that we have our 20 and 21 for our basic FTP server, as well as the passive ports of 30,000 to 31,000. And again, that's probably far too many than what we need. And then the last thing that we want to do real quick to check on our server before we move forward is simply using either the file manager or simply navigating on the console. We can go to other locations, we can go to computer, we can go to home, and we see that we've created the profile for the GCM-FTP user, and specifically inside of that folder, we have created a downloads and an uploads folder. Now, again, that's part of a two-step process. The first thing that you would want to do is to create the user and then ultimately create the folders with the correct permissions. And I've handled that again in an earlier video. We are essentially set to go on our server. It's time now to move to the client. Now, we've done this a couple of times when the server and the client were on the same machine. This time, though, the difference is going to be that we are now on a separate machine, and we're going to attempt to log in using our FTP client to our FTP server. And so the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you have the server's IP address. And just in case you've forgotten, you can just simply go over and run the if config on the server, and you'll see that it is 192.168.2.97. And then on the client, you simply run the FTP command with that IP address. So in this case, 192.168.2.97. Now, this is assuming that you have already installed the FTP client. If you've not, you can simply hit Y. It will attempt to download, then install the package again, select Y. And now you should have, if there's no errors, the FTP client installed. And again, we have a login failed. Don't worry too much about that. We're effectively going to need to rerun this. And so we have hit the up arrow, and now we should get prompted for a username. Now, the username is not going to be, in this case, the G. Myers account. It is going to be that dedicated FTP user account. So we'll want to enter in our GCM-FTP user or whatever FTP user account you have created, and you will be prompted then for the password. In this case, it'll be the password, that very simple password that I set up for the FTP user. Again, remember that with this account, we're actually going to be using Wireshark in a later video to demonstrate how we can actually capture the password from the user or intercept it on its way to the FTP server. But go ahead and hit enter. And if we don't have any problems, we should get a response back from our FTP server. Again, here, got a little bit of a delay here. There we go. I'm not sure exactly what caused that delay. It might be doing system updates on the server, might want to increase the amount of resources on the server. But nonetheless, we are logged in, and you can now run our ls-l, and you'll see that I am sitting in this folder. Now, on the client, if we were to run the exclamation point or bang dir command, you'll see that I am sitting in a different set of folders. And if you want to understand sort of what's going on here, you can, again, on the client, load the file manager, and you can see that effectively I'm sitting in this folder. Now, what we'd like to do is do something similar to what we did in an earlier video. We'd like to go into our documents folder. And in this case, I've already created a couple of text files. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of one of them here, because the idea is we're going to see how we can download this file from our FTP server in just a second. But what we want to do is we want to have a text file or some other file sitting in our documents folder. And the idea is that now, let's say you've forgotten to CD into the correct folder. In other words, you're sitting outside here in the root of the profile. And what you'd like to do is run the lcd command to CD into the documents folder. And if we do an ls-l now, you'll see that I am in the remote folder over here. But if I run the bang dir command, I am in the same folder as my hello.txt on the local machine. And again, you've got a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. Again, there's also the pwd command, which tells you the root, or rather the folder that you sit in on the FTP server. There's a number of commands that you can run both locally and remotely. We're going to focus in on some basic ones, and particularly what we want to do now is we want to CD into the uploads folder, because the idea is I want to get this hello.txt ultimately over here to this folder. And you can see right now it is empty. So what we'll do is, again, we're going to run the ls-l just so that you have some situational awareness, so that you know where you are. You want to CD into the uploads folder. You got to be careful about the capitalization. And then again, we'll do an ls-l, and you'll see that there are no files in this folder, which kind of makes sense because, again, on the server, there is nothing in the uploads folder. At this point, because we are in the correct local directory, in other words, if we run, again, our bang dir, you'll see that there is my hello.txt. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to simply put the hello.txt, again, case sensitive, on our server. And you'll see that the transfer is complete, number of bytes that were sent, etc. And you can come over here to the server, and if we refresh, you'll see there is our hello.txt. Now, what we'll do as a simple test is we're simply going to copy this hello.txt, and we're going to put it in our downloads folder. And in this case, I'm just going to change the name to goodbye.txt. And then on our FTP client, again, if we do an ls-l, you'll see that we have managed to upload the hello.txt, but we don't see the goodbye.txt. And the way we accomplish this is by CDing back out to the root. Again, we can do an ls-l so we can see our downloads and our uploads folder, and we can CD into our downloads folder. In other words, these are the files that we wish to get from the server. And again, we do an ls-l, and you'll see there is our goodbye.txt. Now, in order to be able to get the file from the server? Well, as you guessed it, you simply run the git command and we get goodbye.txt. And now you'll see that almost immediately on our client pops up our goodbye.txt. So hopefully this helps you in figuring out how the client and the server work. Just in case that you did not get connected to the server, make sure that you check your configuration file, in other words, the vsftpd.conf file, to make sure that you have the configuration set up correctly. Also make sure that you've plugged the correct holes or poked the correct holes in your firewall. Make sure the service is up and running. And then one additional step that you can always check when it comes to running these types of services, whether it be FTP or HTTP, is that you can always use your nmap command. And in this case, what we can do is we'll see that if we nmap against the server, in other words, the 192.168.2.97, it might take just a second here to query the ports on the server, but what we will get back is going to be the same thing that we would otherwise see if we ran nmap on our server. So in this case, 192.168.2.97, I'm essentially running nmap on itself, and you'll see that I have the open port 21 for FTP, for SSH, and if I had a web browser, or excuse me, a web server rather, then I may have some additional ports open. Now, occasionally this takes a second. We won't bother to prolong this video, but if you wait for this to finish, in this case, it's scanning for all of the ports. We should probably just try to do a quick scan, but ultimately you should get this exact same list on your client. This is just simply another step in troubleshooting whether or not your FTP server is working. At this point, you can just simply exit from your FTP client, and we are done with this demonstration. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and thank you for watching.